Hey guys, full send side by side. Today I'm going to be installing the SuperATV Rhino U-Series prop shaft set into my 2018 XP Turbo. Due to the stock ones being bent, both front and back, I already have a SuperATV carrier bearing in this unit, but I'll explain how to get the stock carrier bearing out. To get the front prop shaft out, you have to destroy the original carrier bearing in order to get the original prop shaft out. I highly recommend you putting a SuperATV or equivalent aftermarket carrier bearing in your unit. We'll start with what you need to do first. Walk around this side of the machine. Start by taking your clutch cover off. You have to take the clutch cover off in order to easily access your Allen head bolts on this back yoke on the transmission. And then I'll jack the machine up, take the skid plates off, and then move towards the center of the vehicle, inside the cab, take off this center section here around the shifter. I have to take the seats out. There's a couple Torx head bolts and a couple snaps that you have to take out, and then I'll be able to access the carrier bearing. Alright, so I've got the clutch cover off so I can get to these Allen head bolts back here in this back yoke. I'll take those 4 out, and you may have to hit that yoke with a hammer in order to get it off of that shaft. And once you get that done, you should be able to slide that shaft off of the front shaft where it couples up here at the carrier bearing. Once you get that shaft out on a stock carrier bearing, you'll want to take, there's 2 bolts down here, you'll take both of those out. And then there is a C-clip that will be right here. This has a collar on it. You have to use a collar with a stock prop shaft with this carrier bearing, but with a SuperATV aftermarket prop shaft, you can just use a C-clip. It's supplied with it. You'll take those bolts loose. You actually have to pry the outer rubber and mount of the original prop shaft out to take it away from the center bearing, and then you can pry that back away. There'll actually be a scatter shield here you have to take out, but it doesn't fit back in with the aftermarket carrier bearing. I wish I could show you guys how to do that, but it's actually not too bad. You take a couple bolts out of the front up here, and then actually it's mounted to the 2 bolts that hold the carrier bearing down, and then there's one 8mm bolt in the back that holds it on. And then once you get the carrier bearing, the outer half of the stock carrier bearing pried off, then all you have to do in the front is drive the roll pin out of the front yoke, which I'll show you how to do that here momentarily. Alright, so I got those 4 bolts out. You'll have to jack up the back of the machine as well, because you'll have to put it in neutral to where you can rotate the yoke around in order to get all 4 of those Allen head bolts out. Because when you put this aftermarket carrier bearing in with that collar on it, I actually had to take the carrier bearing apart in order to get enough room to slide that shaft out, because there's not enough clearance because of that collar that isolates the front prop shaft and centers it on the bearing. I have to take the top half of that bearing carrier off, and in order to get it around, because there's this big nut back here that bolts that yoke to that shaft. And once you get it clear of that, you can pull it up this way, kind of pull it up towards your primary clutch, and then you should be able to slide it straight out the back of the machine. So now that I've got that done, I'm gonna come up here. I don't think it's any easier or harder to access this front yoke. Actually, it would be a little bit easier from this side. I did it from this side the last time. But you have to get up here and drive this roll pin out of this front yoke. If you can see it. The easiest way I found to do it is you have to take the tire off, take the entire, take the hub off, take the spindle off. Once you take the spindle off, take this top shock bolt out. You can tie that shock and that A-arm up here with zip ties or something. Just tie it up out of the way, let the lower A-arm hang. You have to take your stabilizer links off of both sides so you can kind of swing it out of the way. Then I had a bunch of trouble trying to get this roll pin out. I ended up using an air hammer and driving it as far as I could with the air hammer, and then hammering it out the rest of the way with a punch. Some of them are easier than others from what I've heard. This one just happened to be a big pain when I did it the first time. The new drive shaft or prop shaft comes with a new roll pin, so that's kind of a nice thing that they do, because you end up kind of rounding this front edge off of this roll pin. Kind of makes it a little bit hard to drive out the next time. I think that might have been why it was a little bit harder to drive out the first time, because I had it rounded off. But I'll cut back in once I get this roll pin out, or get to where I'm going to start driving it out. Show you what it looks like when I have the suspension all pulled up off of this side. Alright, so I've got everything taken apart up here that I need to take apart. So I've just got the shock undone and tied up to my bumper, and I've got this upper A-arm tied up to the shock, and then your steering linkage, you're just going to tie it up here, your tie rod, tie it up here to the A-arm. And then I had to take the sway bar link off of the other side in order to get the sway bar to drop down out of the way, so I can get the air hammer back in here. Let me grab my light real quick. So now you can get up in here, get to that roll pin and drive it out. And once you get that drove out, you can pull this shaft out the back the same way. You have to pull it back, and then you can drop it straight down once you get it pulled back far enough. I'll get this roll pin knocked out and pull this shaft out, and then start doing the reinstall. Front prop shaft's out. Came out a lot easier this time. Once you get the roll pin beat out, then just slide it straight back, straight over the carrier bearing, or where it was sitting, and then you can drop it straight out. I'm going to show you the difference between the original and the SuperATV Rhino series. So it's just a whole lot beefier. The tubing is a 1/2 inch larger in diameter compared to stock, and the tubing wall is about 4/100 thicker than the original. They have a little bit stronger yoke design on both ends. It's chromoly tubing compared to the original carbon tubing. It comes with instructions on the phasing. Basically, you phase the back, the fixed end of the yoke needs to be sitting horizontal, and the front end fixed end, this yoke needs to be vertical. But it does come with instructions on how to do it. So all I have to do now is take that bearing off the old prop shaft and slide it back down onto this, put the C-clip in, and then I'll start putting it back together. So I got the front prop shaft in, I got the roll pin in it, got this bearing block aligned correctly. Then when I was putting in the rear prop shaft, ran into a clearance issue. Since it's a 1/2 inch larger in diameter, I couldn't get it to clear between the rear section of the clutch cover and this cross member. There just wasn't enough room. So I ended up having to take a bunch of stuff apart. And in here, you have to take the this cross member out that the seats mount to. And then there's this tray underneath there that the battery sits in, and then the fuse panel is mounted to it. So you have to take the battery out, take that fuse panel loose, and it'll kind of fall down underneath there, and then put the cover back on it so you don't get a bunch of dirt in it. Then once you do that, and there's you didn't necessarily have to take the fuel lines and everything loose, but I didn't know if I was actually going to have to take the tank out or not. But I luckily ended up not having to do that. I drained all the fuel out of it, so I wasn't pressing up on 50 pounds worth of fuel. So once you get to this point, which you may not have to go this far, but I went ahead and did it so I didn't have to try over and over and over again to get the shaft up in here. But you'll want to slide it on this side of this cross member right here, and then you'll slide it all the way up past the carrier bearing up until it'll pretty much touch the firewall up here, and then you'll be able to push it up and make it clear that cross member back here. Then once you get it to clear that cross member, you can slide it on back past where the yoke mounts, and then make sure you get it phased right and slide it back up onto the front prop shaft. I'm gonna work on getting all this stuff put back together inside of the cab here, and then once I get everything put back together, mainly just putting the front suspension back together, putting the clutch cover back on once I get those 4 bolts back here in the back. So I've got everything put back together and greased up. I'm gonna let it warm up. It's dark outside now, so I'm gonna make a separate video. I'm gonna go out, run around on the track a little bit, maybe sometime this week. But thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time